Before we begin this podcast, please be advised that the following episode contains language that some listeners may find offensive and inappropriate. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast producers. Listener discretion is advised.
In this episode of Voices of a Killer, we dive into the case of Stanley Kenaga Jr., a man whose life spiraled into chaos after a deadly encounter in the small town of Birch Tree. Stanley claims that the tragic events of that night were driven by a plan to steal $20,000, but something went horribly wrong. What led Stanley and his brother-in-law, Joseph Proffer, to target Barbara Lynn, a 77-year-old woman who was brutally murdered in her home? Why did Stanley choose to protect Joseph, even as the situation escalated? Was this loyalty worth the price of his freedom, or was there something deeper at play? We'll explore these questions, uncovering the layers of Stanley's story and the choices that sealed his fate in this episode of Voices of a Killer.
So Stanley, are you from Missouri as well?
Yes.
Born and raised?
I was born in West Plains and raised right in that area.
Did you have siblings?
I had a sister, but I never really knew her.
So you were the only child in the house?
Yes.
How would you describe your childhood growing up?
Excuse my language, pretty fucked up, honestly.
Why is that?
I was molested when I was 7.
7? By who?
And it happened by my mom and dad had these 2 friends that we were living with because we were homeless. And we lived with them for a year. And every day after school, they'd molest me.
Did your parents know about it?
I told them, but they didn't believe me. They told me to quit lying.
Really?
Yeah. My mom was addicted to coke, and my dad was an alcoholic.
Were the people staying with y'all as well doing illegal substances?
Yeah.
How'd that make you feel, your parents not believing you?
It made me angry.
Did that affect your schooling and all that growing up?
Oh, of course. I've got a 3rd grade reading and writing level. I really didn't pay much attention in school. I got in trouble too much, fighting. Just wouldn't pay attention in school.
Besides the sexual abuse, was there anything else, like violence or anything like that?
My dad used to get drunk and beat me with anything he could get his hands on. Dog chains, fan blades, stealing fan blades.
So at what point did these people leave your home?
We were staying with them when I was 8 years old. A year after we'd been with them for a year, we moved from their house to a place of our own.
As you became an adult, did you ever run back across the people that abused you?
Yes, I did.
How'd that work? You meet up with the people that abused you later on in life.
I actually found out where they lived, and I shot their house up.
Really? Did you get in trouble for that?
Yeah. No, I never got in trouble for it.
I guess it's safe to say that you shot their house up because what they did to you when you were a child?
Yeah.
How old were you when you shot the house up?
20 or 21.
So you were still holding on to that in your 20s?
Oh, yeah.
Did they know it was you that shot their house up?
I don't think they did. I never made it known.
Yeah.
But it made me feel better.
Was anybody with you when you did that?
No.
What'd you do whenever you got out of high school? Did you start working?
I never made it to high school.
Never made it to high school. And how old are you?
I dropped. Right now, how old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 34.
So you never even made it to freshman year of high school. What did you do?
I dropped out in 7th grade.
What'd you do after that?
I got a job working at a sawmill.
Wow. Would that have been like what, in the 90s or early thousands?
I was 16.
Yeah.
But I also was held back 3 times. So I was behind. Everybody else was younger than I was in school, my class.
Did you get into drugs and alcohol as a kid?
Oh, yeah. I used methamphetamines for my first time when I was 13.
Who gave that to you?
Actually, a close friend of mine.
Yeah.
He was older than me. He was 16, and he was doing it, so I wanted to do it too.
Did you take off and start doing meth a lot after that?
I was strung out on drugs.
Yeah. Did you work at the time?
I was selling drugs instead of working. That was my job, selling meth.
Yeah. Did you ever get put in jail before this?
For traffic tickets and child support, yes.
Yeah.
And burglary.
Born into an environment of instability where his parents were homeless and his mother struggled with addiction while his father battled alcoholism, Stanley was exposed to unthinkable harm at a young age. Being abused at just 7 years old by family friends, while his parents turned a blind eye to his pleas, created a cycle of neglect and violence that would shape his outlook on life. His father's violent outbursts, beating him with objects like dog chains and saw blades, only deepened Stanley's exposure to brutality. Research has shown that childhood trauma, especially abuse, can have long-lasting psychological effects. According to the CDC, individuals who experience adverse childhood experiences or ACEs like abuse are at a higher risk of developing mental health issues, substance abuse problems, and engaging in violent behavior later in life. In Stanley's case, this may explain why the unresolved anger from his childhood led him to violent acts as an adult. The weight of his traumatic past stayed with him into adulthood, shaping his actions and sense of justice. As we delve deeper into Stanley's story, we're left asking, could early intervention have changed his path? How much of his violent behavior later in life is linked to the trauma he endured as a child? Statistics suggest that without proper support, many victims of childhood abuse spiral into a cycle of self-destruction. Could Stanley's story have had a different outcome if someone had believed him all those years ago? As we continue to hear Stanley's story, we'll find out about his own experience as a parent after the break.
When did you have a child?
I was 16 when I had my first daughter.
16. I'm going to guess that you weren't really fit to be a parent at that time.
Probably not, but I did my best. I had a full-time job. I got married when I was 16 to my first wife.
Yeah. Do you still have a relationship with your kid?
No, I don't have a relationship with anybody.
How come?
I don't know. Nobody has given me their information, and I don't know numbers or addresses.
How does that feel that you're in prison for basically life without, and you have nobody on the outside, no family, your kids don't reach out to you? What does that feel like?
It sucks.
Yeah.
I hope and pray one day that my kids will reach out to me. If they don't,
if they were listening right now, what would you say?
But I love them, and I always have, and I always will. And I'm sorry for the things that I've done.
Why do you think they don't reach out to you?
I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with their mother.
Does their mother hate you?
Yes.
I got to ask you real quick on the audio for your call. It says Stanley, your son, answer, pick up or something like that. Who are you referring to?
Do what? My dad, before he passed away.
Gotcha.
He was the only person I talked to.
Okay.
He died 2 months ago.
Okay.
At just 16, Stanley became a father for the first time, but today he finds himself completely disconnected from his children, with no contact information and no way to reach out. The pain of this isolation is palpable, as Stanley reflects on how his decisions have led to a complete separation from those he loves. He admits that he has no family left. His father, the last person he spoke to, passed away just 2 months before this interview. His voice carries the burden of regret as he expresses his hope that one day his children might reach out to him, so he can tell them that he loves them and always will. But as we hear Stanley's reflections on his own family, it brings to mind the family of Barbara Lynn, the 77-year-old woman whose life he took. Does he think about the grief he caused them in the same way he contemplates his own losses? Is there room for remorse in a man who has lost everything himself? But first, we'll discover exactly what happened on that fateful day on the next episode of Voices of a Killer. you want to find out what happens next, right now, you can sign up at patreon.com/voicesofakiller. There you can find bonus content, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community. So go to patreon.com/voicesofakiller to sign up now. Your support is what keeps us passionate about bringing these stories to you. That's a wrap on this episode of Voices of a Killer. A big shout out to Sonic Futures, who handled the production, audio editing, music licensing, and promotion of this podcast. If you want to hear more episodes like this one, make sure to visit our website at voicesofakiller.com. There you can find previous episodes, transcripts, and additional information about the podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach new listeners. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more stories with you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Toby, and we'll see you next time on Voices of a Killer.